Canadian. I come from this little town in northern Alberta, which is only about 50 years old. And Canada, especially Western Canada, is a very, very new country. And so when I come to a place like Holland and I hear the Dutch people, especially the intellectuals and the artistic leaders, express doubts about the integrity of their culture, it's just absolutely shocking to me, because when I come in as an outsider, I think Holland is one of the great cultures, has one of the great cultures of the world, but technologically, because your society runs so smoothly. It's an absolute bloody miracle, especially because you should be underwater. And then culturally as well, I mean, Amsterdam's an absolutely beautiful city. It has a rich artistic tradition, a rich religious tradition. And if you Dutch are starting to doubt the validity of your own identity, there's no hope for, well, let's say for Canadians. And of course, our Prime Minister has already famously announced that Canada has no core identity and that we're the first post-national state. And so, but how do you, Eva, how do you read the fundamental motivation of the globalists? I mean, you talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I have to admit, or also pronounce, that I helped write the original Sustainable Goal document, and that was probably 10 years ago. And in my defense, I can tell you that the drafts that were produced before the team that I was working on rewrote them were a hell of a lot more vicious and troublesome than the drafts that we ended up with. We took a lot of idiotic Cold War pro-socialist prose out of the descriptions and tried to make sense out of it. I came out of that with a sense that I was extraordinarily confused at the multitude of the goals because there was no prioritization, and also about the potential danger of precisely the top-down machinations that you're describing. But as you said, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals one by one, it's very difficult to take issue with them. They all look positive. The problem is that they're converted into top-down policy that's implemented by force. And you pointed out something else that's extraordinarily troublesome, which is that as we move toward international governance, which is obviously necessary to some degree because nations have to communicate, we're moving the distance between people at the local level, like the Dutch farmers, and those who putatively govern them. We're putting in such a distance between them in terms of communication that there is no communication. There's just top-down edict. That's a real Tower of Babel situation. And the reason I think the Dutch farmers are bellwethers or canaries in the coal mine is because they are so-called ordinary, competent people, hyper-competent people, and they're shaking their fist in the air saying, look, you're demolishing our livelihoods here while you're pursuing your virtue-signaling, self-aggrandizing, hyper-moral goals. And not only are you not accomplishing those goals, you're actually working at counter-purposes to them, like the German government has managed on the energy front. And so we're seeing a danger of a very intrusive form of global governance, and that's, as you said, is taking priority over all national, local, and individual concerns. And that's a huge danger, and I don't think people are cognizant of that at all yet, lost as they are in this delusion that we're doing something like serving the environment, right? It's a very, very simple narrative. But so what do you see, though? You know, you made a bit of a case there for the beneficial motives of some of the globalists, at least in relationship to these goals, but there's a nefarious element to what's going on. What do you think the fundamental intent is? You know, like I worry about statements like the planet has too many people on it and we've exceeded the carrying capacity of the biosphere, et cetera, which sound to me like implicitly murderous. It's essentially murderous sentiment or suicidal. But what do you think? What do you think the intent of the globalists is if you had to give the devil his due?
Yes. Okay. So globalists, I mean, obviously they're people. So the flaws that are in our human souls, the want for power and money lives inside of them as well. And they want to do it on a global scale. So the biggest evil, I would say, imaginable gets its chance if you let the globalists take rule. So what do you want to do if you are a globalist who wants to, you know, open up all borders, have essentially the biggest consumer base in the world, which is the entire world, right? Well, then things like Christianity, national identity, cultural identity are just things that stand in your way. If you want to create the perfect consumer, then you want somebody who doesn't know who he is, who doesn't know what he stands for. You know, a devout Christian, for example, who wants nothing more than to start a family and work hard and live for God, is not going to be the perfect consumer that sits on his couch, watches Netflix all day, orders his food from Uber Eats, you know, and does nothing more than that, does nothing more than just consume. So I think that it's, for me at least, it's hard not to see, again, the question of intent, you know, of trying to uproot people so that they are confused and aimless souls that will buy what these globalists offer and do as they say. And I think that that is exactly what we are witnessing today. Most of us are turning into perfect consumers without a higher purpose.
Oh, well, you sound, when you talk like that, you sound more like Joe Rogan or Russell Brand, and maybe even Bernie Sanders, you know, these people on the left who are still genuine leftists in some sense, who are hyper concerned about corporate gigantism, which I think is a genuine element of concern. And what you're seeing expressing is an unholy, and I would say truly fascist level of collusion between corporate giants who are essentially motivated by very little else than a kind of self-serving greed, and maybe, which might work at a local level when there's lots of competition, but when they're large enough to engage in regulatory capture and to engage in collusion with government and media, that poses another one of these Tower of Babel threats to all of us. I don't know anything except for what we've talked about briefly about this Tri-City hypothesis, and that seems to be, like, I wouldn't want to wander down that rabbit hole unless it was absolutely necessary, given that there's already alternative.
It's not a hypothesis.
You're very, well, that's what I want you to make a case for that and tell people why you...
Web search Tri-State City and you'll see the map instantly. They've got it mapped out. We'd be sitting right in the middle of it right here. The map is mapped out. They're doing research to make it now. And when I see Trump talking about beautiful cities, I mean, it sounds like Tri-State City, which is a smart city, which is meant for complete control. I mean, they're already doing at Brainport City, their experiment. I've been to Brainport City over there looking at things. Look, we could have the same, I'm going to Japan again next week. Again, I've written 3 books that are only in Japanese about this subject. And I'm going there again next week. We could have this exact same discussion. If we take this to the orbital view, the exact same discussion in Japan, and the details would sound almost like they do here, like little details. They don't talk about Stickstoff, nitrogen, but they talk about other things.